Can you tell us about your Uncle Chuck and the connection to praying to God?
My father had a brother, and his name was Chuck. His name was Charles. Everybody called him Chuck. And he was always busy with the latest scheme, but his enthusiasm was not matched by ability, if you know what I mean. So he was always getting these harebrained schemes that never panned out, and he would lose money. But the next one was a surefire. This time it was all going to work out. It was just money in the bank. He just needed to borrow a little bit from my father. So, my father was he was a very kind person. He was a very good and kind person. I'm very grateful to him. So he would loan him some money. He'd give him a little bit of money. But after once, twice, three times, every time you see somebody, he'd see him at a family function, he'd see him at a wedding, and Uncle Chuck would always sidle up to my father and hit him up for money. It got to the point that if he'd call our house, my mother or one of the kids would answer the phone, and my father was, be in the other room doing something. They say, "Oh, it's your brother. My Uncle Chuck's on the phone." And my father would say, "Spare me. How much does he want? Just tell me how much he wants." Now, if you have a relationship with someone like that, you're not really happy to see them because they're just going to ask you for something. They're not calling you to ask how you are. They're not asking, do you need anything? They're not calling because they like you and just want to hang out with you. They want something. So, okay, God give us this day our daily bread. Well, at least we're recognizing that God is the source of all things and that we're all dependent. But that's not really love. It's not love of God. It's love of bread. The shadow of the hand has 5 fingers because the hand has 5 fingers. We are emanations. We are sparks, like sparks from the fire, of drops of water from the ocean. We have personalities. We have emotions. Why do we think that the absolute truth, the cause of all causes, although being present everywhere and in everyone's heart, also has a person? God is a person simultaneously, like the sun is localized and shining everywhere. You can point to the sun, there it is. I'll tell you about I don't know who to pick on, let's say the Polish space program. So this Polish space program, to get credit, they're going to go somewhere new. Where are they going to go? Well, they said, we're going to go to the sun. I said, you can't go to the sun. You'll burn up. They said, you think we're dummies? We're going to go at night. Ha 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 ha. So the point is that the sun is localized and shining everywhere. So how can not the creator, God, of unlimited suns, it can't also be localized and present everywhere? If the creator. So my point being that as we have emotions and we have relationships, God has emotions and God has relationships. He's the source of all emotions and all relationships. How does God feel when the only time we pray is when we want something? People tell me all the time, "Oh, I pray to God." I say, so what? What are you doing for God is the real question. So just as my father, although he was a kind and good man, his brother Chuck wore on him after a while. So you think that everyone's going to church and praying to God for bread, but never asking what they can do for God? How do you think God feels about that? So that's the analogy. Uncle Chuck, he did so many things. Remember when the Olympics were in LA and they run with that torch, they pass it. So his company made that torch. It kept going out. It kept going out. There was a defect. That was Uncle Chuck. Everything he touched went backwards. They had to have backup torches. Anyway. That's Uncle Chuck.
What are your views on anger, lust, and greed?
Krishna calls them the gates to hell. You know, act in haste, lament in leisure. You ever heard that saying? We are being pushed. These are called Kama Veda, Krota Vega. Vega means pushing, like you push a cart, you know. So we are being pushed all the time. There's passion killings and people regret it later. They're just, you know. So count to 10 before if you're about to lose your temper, before you say something. The living entity, each of us is an eternal soul. And we're riding in this body, which is a machine. It's a machine made of material energy. Just like I'm driving in a Cadillac or a Prius or whatever I'm driving. I can get in and I get out and I'm driving it. So each of us is picking up where we left off in our last life. And there's a goal to the thing. But we are covered by conditioning. And that conditioning takes different forms. And like you say, 3 of those forms are lust, anger, and greed. And they're pushing us. They're pushing us to act against our best interests. I mean, people drink alcohol. I saw a t-shirt the other day. It said, instant idiot, just add alcohol. So, and people gamble away their money. There's passion killings. So we can understand that, we're like those old cartoon movies that they show the angel on one side and the devil on the other. So if we understand, wait a minute, I'm not these emotions. That's not who I am. I'm not just the latest thought that flits across my mind. I'm actually an eternal soul. And I have deeper, long-term interests. One develops like a fail-safe mechanism. Before you push the button, there's a time delay. So if we're trained properly in the science of bhakti yoga, we learn to identify with our actual self, the soul, and not with lust, not with anger, not with greed. We don't have to live like this. That's one of the great messages of the great saints and sages. Wait a minute. There's another way to live.
What are your views on the portrayals of Hare Krishna devotees in mainstream media?
Well, there's a lot of different portrayals. Some are good, some are accurate, some are silly. There was a time that if they showed an airport, they showed the Hare Krishna devotees distributing books.
Hello, we'd like you to have this flower from the Church of Religious Consciousness. Would you like to make a donation?
No thanks, we gave it the office.
If they show Venice Beach, they'll show the devotees chanting there or some of our festivals. So on one hand, the holy name of the Supreme Lord is efficacious, or by that I mean it's purifying. And anyone who says Krishna, they get a spiritual benefit. Even if they said, if I touch fire, it burns me. I don't have to know it's an exothermic reaction. And a kid touches fire, he gets burnt. That's why you will find in practically every genuine spiritual tradition, they have a practice of repeating in a prayerful way the holy name of God. Whether they say Jehovah or Allah or Yahweh or Krishna, the holy name of the Supreme Lord purifies. So on one hand, any way they say Krishna, if they say it in a Hollywood comedy or whatever it is, we don't mind. They get a spiritual benefit. But the fact of the matter is, usually it's pretty superficial. Bhagavad Gita, the tradition itself says it's 5,000 years old. Now I'm 71. I remember when I went to college, they said the Vedas were 2,000 years old. Then they said 3,000. They tried to put everything within the Christian era, And then they say, well, maybe it's 2,500. Now they say, well, maybe it's 3,000. Now you go to UCLA, you go to Berkeley, they'll tell you, well, it's 3,500, maybe 4,000 years old. So they keep moving the date back. So the Bhagavad Gita, that's our core source book of knowledge, was spoken over 5,000 years ago. If you go to India, you'll see unbelievably beautiful temples. And those temples are all laid out, the ones that are made from stone bricks, stone blocks, and carved on the site. I mean, they're all laid out by geometrical patterns and designs. There's a whole science called Vastu Silpa Shastra that is how you lay out for sacred space. So it's a deep science. They had geometry ages ago. So it's the quality of the music. They're not out there, I don't want to offend anybody, but just wailing away on an electric guitar, 4 chords. But deep, sophisticated artistry and science. So it's a deep, deep tradition.
What impact do you think the Beatles' interest in the Hare Krishna movement had?
It wasn't that all the Beatles were interested. They were all very nice. They all met Srila Prabhupada. They would go visit him at our London temple sometimes. But it really stuck with John Lennon and George Harrison. And John Lennon, the mystery of what broke up the Beatles and Yoko Ono and all these things. Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, before our temple opened, was staying at John Lennon's, he had some huge mansion, some manor out in the countryside. And the devotees, in exchange for doing some service, they were helping with painting and cleaning up the gardens and stuff. And John Lennon invited them to stay. And when Srila Prabhupada came, he had a guest house. They didn't let Prabhupada stay in the nice, it was a nice guest house, and Prabhupada stayed there. So John Lennon was very nice. He had a piano in his kitchen. And one of who became a lifelong friend of John Lennon, his name is Shama Sundar. He was an early devotee from San Francisco. And he was with that group helping start the temple in London. And he was refurbishing something, and John Lennon was in the kitchen playing the piano. And he was playing Hare Krishna tunes. He was an excellent musician. He would go in ragtime, and then he'd do it in, whatever it was, in classical tune, in California blues, He was changing the style of music and chanting Hare Krishna and having a whole lot of fun, Shama Sundar there in the kitchen, he's banging away and having fun. And Yoko Ono came down in a bathrobe and says, "John, stop that banging. I have a horrible headache." And then she just grabbed him by the arm and dragged him off. And, lust as overpowering us. Shama Sundar and John Lennon made eye contact. And John Lennon was like, "Well, what can I do? I got to keep her happy." So he fell into some other things and fell away. George Harrison, all of his life, remained very serious about his spiritual life. And he helped us in many, many, many ways. And he brought a lot of people to the idea of, living in the material world. Hey, maybe I'm not just matter. Maybe I'm not just brain function. Maybe I'm something else. Maybe there's karma. Maybe there's reincarnation, transmigration of the self. So he reached out to a lot of people. He helped us personally. I mean, ISKCON, he bought our temple in London, outside Bhaktivedanta Manor. So he did a lot. He recorded that Hare Krishna album where the devotees chanting became #1 in Europe. So many things. I never met him personally, but from everyone who did, he was a very nice person. And with all that fame, he said to one of our devotees, "People say money can't buy happiness." So he said, people who don't have money hope that that's true. Because if you need money to be happy and I don't have money, then you're up a creek without a paddle. And then he said he looked at the devotee with such deep realization. You know, people who don't have money hope you don't need money for happiness. And then he said, people who have money know that it's true. In other words, if you've got money, you can buy anything and everything you want. It does not actually, people who have it know it doesn't bring happiness. So he was a very nice person in spite of all of that fame and money and influence. It didn't really turn his head. And he helped the devotees a lot, and he brought a lot of people to starting to chant Hare Krishna and think about spiritual life. So he did a lot of good. He met many, many times with Srila Prabhupada on that Living in the Material World album. And I think the one before that, I think was called All Things Must Pass. Prabhupada gave him many of the ideas for those songs. Yeah, Prabhupada would sing to him Bengali bhajans by Narottam Das Thakur and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And then Prabhupada would tell him, put it in Western language, put it in Western. So he got a number of themes like that, you know. So it was very nice. He was a good he used to visit our temple in Vrindavan. He would, you know, spend some time there, take a break, chant Hare Krishna mantra, read Bhagavad Gita with the devotees, you know, because he was under a lot of pressure. I mean, Krishna consciousness would have spread anywhere. It's all attractive. But he was very nice and helpful. He's a good person.
If someone asked, why should I join the Hare Krishna movement, how would you respond?
Hare Krishna.
You know, it's not like a club and you get a membership card and we're trying to see how many Hare Krishnas can you stuff in a phone booth. You know, it's not really like that. It's a spiritual practice, a way of looking at the world that anybody can practice. Of the percentage of Hare Krishna people, only a small percentage are full-time monks. We have lawyers and doctors and teachers and artists and all kinds of people, housewives, house husbands, whatever it is, you know, all. It's a way of looking at the world. We say science, it's a methodology that will actually, you follow the steps, you get a fixed result, but it's a way of elevating our consciousness. So it's not that everybody who practices the principles taught by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, they all shave their head and wear saffron cloth and live in the temple, you know. So many students, but how many are professors? So many priests, how many, you know, they've got congregations. So that's how it is for us. There's a Sanskrit verse in Bhagavad Gita. Someone who's actually learned in spiritual science, they see everyone equal. They don't look at the body, oh, he's black or white or male or female or fat or thin, even dog or cat. The soul is riding in that particular body. So I can get out of a VW, get in a BMW, I can get into a Prius, I can get on a bicycle. So I'm riding in different vehicles, but I'm the same. I'll give you a simple example. They have grain silo, right? Now, you can see them blowing the grains in the top of the silo. And you can see that they're blowing in corn. But you can turn on the spigot at the bottom and you'll see that barley is coming out. You're putting in corn and barley's coming out. What's that? It's a magic silo? What's that all about? What do you think? Is it a magic silo turning grain into corn? What is it? They put the barley in previously. Sometimes they layer those things. There'll be barley, there'll be rye, there'll be corn, you know, to store all the grain. So you may be putting in corn, but earlier you put in rye. So when you turn on the bottom, rye is coming out. When all that's gone, then the corn will come out. So we have lived multiple lifetimes, and there's what's called karma. Every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, there's so many laws of physics, matter moving through time and space. These people study civil engineering, structural engineering, so many things, you know. There's laws of physics. We're bodies moving through time and space. I mean, we're the soul within the body, but no laws determine our action. There's no action. Every other thing you see in the world is governed by action and reaction. And all of a sudden, we're the one thing that isn't. So there's subtle laws. These are called the laws of karma. And there's action and reaction. Jesus says, as you soweth, so shall you reap. You find it in every bona fide tradition. They talk about, there's karmic reaction. There's laws of nature. There's laws of karma. People say, why do bad things happen to good people? How can there be God? And good things happen to bad people? Where's justice in the universe? But if you look at the longer arc, that we've had many, many, many lives, and each life is a lesson. And if we were vain and exploitative in a previous life, we get the reaction for that. And on the subtle karmic platform, we learn that was a bad idea. That's a bad way to treat people. That was, and we learn. The word education comes from the Latin word to draw forth, to bring out, as from darkness into light. So that's real education. It's not just a stack of figures, but it's the actual growth of the self. And that's why we're in this world. Each life is a lesson. We're learning. You can go up, you can go down. We have our free will, but there's a subliminal memory. Just like when you get on a bicycle. I remember learning how to ride a bike. I had training wheels, I crash landed, so many things, But I don't have to consciously remember that. If I get on a bicycle, you just remember. If I go to get out of the seat, I don't have to, how did that work? Left foot before right? How's it, You remember, subtly, subliminally, you remember. So in the subconsciously. So similarly, each life is a lesson. We're experiencing karma. And we're suffering for what we did in the past, but it's not just, tit for tat. You did this, and therefore you have to pay this price. It's like a, checkmate. It's not just it's actually meant to, it's cumulative. The experiences are cumulative, and the soul evolves. Our consciousness evolves. There's a purpose for it. God is merciful, and he's educating us. He's like clay. You know how you knead clay? The reason they need it is it becomes homogeneous. Otherwise, if there's bubbles and sticks, when it's fired, it'll crack. So each life, Krishna's teaching us. He's putting us in particular situations, particular family, particular this and that. And we grow, we evolve. But we have free will.
What benefits can someone get from joining ISKCON that they couldn't get from going to a therapist? Do you think ISKCON and mainstream mental health treatments can work together to help people?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, they're working on different planes. There's a Sanskrit word, Atma, and it has different meanings according to the context. Atma can mean this physical body. Atma can mean the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And it can address the self. So if you think about that, we're this body, we're also the mind and the intelligence and the ego or pride. And ultimately, those all rest on the self, like those Russian eggs, the dolls that you can open up. So we have many, many different coverings. We have a social identity, we have a familial identity, we have a national identity, we have so many different bodily identity. Then we think, well, I'm this type of person, I'm that, I'm a Trumper, I'm a for Biden, I forget them both, whatever it is. So we have all kinds of identities, but they're all nested upon on the self, our actual identity, which is the eternal soul. So understanding that helps with so many things. I forget who the movie star was who used to say, I just want to be left alone.
Well,
I want to be alone.
where have you been? I suppose I can cancel the Vienna contract?
I just want to be alone.
You're going to be very much alone, my dear madame. This is the end.
If we identify with that which is temporary, time is the destroyer of all things. And everything is going to be vanquished in time. And if we identify with material things, they are going to be lost. And we're going to be complete. People are afraid of death, and understandably so. Socrates, so they say, when they gave him hemlock, because he was a social gadfly and stirring up the youth of Athens or whatever it was to think for themselves, he was cursed to take hemlock. And so the story goes, someone gleefully was saying, now we're rid of you. And Socrates said, how are you rid of me? First, you have to catch me. They've got him in jail. They've got him chained. What do you mean, first you have to catch me? But you can't kill the soul. So he was fearless. So if we understand that there's a rhyme and a reason, there's a purpose that things are not happening by random chance and laws of, whatever it is. Things are not just bumping into each other. The Sanskrit word for chance, it happened by chance. That's not actually, you can't say that in Sanskrit. The word they use for chance is called drishta. And the root of that word is to see. And what it means is that you may not know the cause. I may not know the cause. Oh, it happened by chance. Well, okay, you don't know the cause. I don't know the cause. But that doesn't mean there isn't a cause. I just can't see it. So things are not happening by random. There is a divine choreography, and that we're being moved around and put in situations for that purpose of education. So therapy, people suffer from emotional reasons or family issues or, broken hearts or whatever it is. But there's also chemical depression. And sometimes you need to, you can't tell someone who's affected by chemical depression, oh, just chant Hare Krishna, it'll all work out. Well, sometimes, but they may need help. So we're not anti-psychiatry or, therapy. We're not anti that. Sometimes you need it. My spiritual master, Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, is on a morning walk. He's in Germany. I think it's outside Hamburg. We have a nice temple there out there in the country. And he's walking with a big German professor. I forget the university, but he was head of the psychiatry department, psychological department. He was a medical doctor also. And he was about the same age as Prabhupada. He was about, I don't know what, probably close to 80. And he's walking with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, in the course of the conversation, Prabhupada says, I've traveled all over the world, which he had. He said, I've studied the matter very carefully. He said, my conclusion is that everyone is more or less crazy. And he's laughing, And the German professor starts to laugh. He says, jawohl, jawohl, me too. That was his conclusion. I remember reading a book, it was called Faster. And it was talking about how the pace, originally people write a letter. You mail it to somebody. You're in London, they're in New York. It takes 2 weeks to get there. You read the letter, you're agitated, you don't like you cool down, you think about a couple of days later, you write an answer. That you mail it to the person. They've had 2 weeks, now a month. By the time it gets back to them, they've had time to cool down. So the stimulus response span is about a month. You put in telegraphs, then it's shorter amount of time. Then you put in telephones, it's shorter, Then, okay, you don't have to answer the phone, but then you got an answering machine. Hey, I left a message. Then it gets the email, it gets the Instagram, it gets the Facebook, and people are you wind the clock, tighter and after, boing, the mainspring blows after a while. And people don't work, the 5-day workday, forget it. 40-hour, forget it. Sunday morning, your boss can call you and say, hey, I sent you an email last night, you didn't read it? So people are really wound tight. It's not the way human beings are meant to live. We're not wired that way. So everybody's more or less crazy in this age. psychiatry, therapy, talk therapy, all that, they have their benefits. You have to have a good psychiatrist, but they're dealing with issues of the body. They're dealing with issues of the mind, the intelligence and the ego. We offer that we're dealing with the self. We are offering spiritual therapy. It's like if you have $100, automatically you've got $10, $20, they're all included within that. So if one understands Bhagavad Gita, it solves 90% of the problems in the world by understanding karma and justice and getting a handle on lust and greed and anger. Understanding, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my crazy mind taken off. So we're not deprecating the value of therapy or psychiatry. They have their place, they have their purpose. But if you want to deal with the core issues, the really essential core issues, those are on a spiritual level. If you want to deal with the spiritual level, you've got to have a spiritual means. You can't go to the moon in an air balloon. You got to have the right vehicle. So that's what we would say about that. The thing is that we all want to be happy. I mean, okay, there's a few masochists out there. All right, we'll accept that, But generally speaking, even a plant will turn towards the sun. So every living entity, how they define it is a different thing. How they try to experience is a different thing. Every entity is driven by a desire for happiness. The Sanskrit verse from Gita, part of it is, Brahmabhuta prasannatma, na sojate, na kanchate. So the happiness of Brahmabhuta, one who's on the level of Brahman or self-realization, prasannatma. Prasanna means happiness, satisfaction, and atma means of the self. And someone who is on that level realizes they're eternal. They're not the body or the mind or the intelligence or the ego. They're the soul. And one who lives on that platform becomes satisfied. It's called Atma Rama, self-pleased, self-satisfied. You don't need something from the outside. And what are the symptoms? Na sojate, na kanchate. They're free from hankering. They're free from lamenting. I saw a bumper sticker. I love these bumper stickers. This one, because it's what people are actually thinking. It says, one who says money can't buy happiness doesn't know where to shop. So, and you read about people who win the lottery and it just makes them miserable. They say, well, if I had that money, I'd know what to do. No, because ultimately we are spiritual. And what makes us ultimately happy is pure love. And pure love is the love of Krishna, of God, the Supreme. Krishna says, I'm the light of the sun of the moon. I'm the pure taste in water. A devotee, he goes out and smells a flower. He thinks, oh, this is coming from Krishna. He drinks refreshed with water. This is coming from Krishna. Krishna is the light of the sun and the moon. I mean, these are indirect energies of Krishna. What to speak of meeting God, Krishna himself, face to face. But the point is that that's what we're looking for. And if you satisfy that, then we're satisfied in any condition. We're not desperately needy. Give me more, more, more. I want. If only I was here, if only I was there. Therapy, psychology, psychiatry, they have their place. But even if you solve all those problems, you haven't gotten to the root cause of the thing. And the root cause is the soul separation from Krishna. That's the ultimate root of the dissatisfaction. And the science of Bhakti Yoga that teaches that, that's the best thing.
Can you tell us about yourself and how you joined the Hare Krishna movement?
I was born in a pretty comfortable life. I remember my dutiful parents took me to church. And I remember at the parking lot, people be in the church, pious like anything, praying to God. They get out of church Sunday morning, and the Super Bowl used to start, in the afternoon. And sometimes they would, whatever. they would run over their dying grandmother to get out of that parking lot and get home for the Super Bowl. They'd be swearing at each other, flipping the bird, you know. And I was thinking, hey, 10 minutes ago, they were, you know, praying to God. You know? So I saw a lot of hypocrisy. And you see it in Hinduism. We're not Hindus. You know, the Christians are playing God give us this daily bread. The Hindus have us saying Om Jaya Jagadish Hari. And the next line is, give me a new car and a house by the sea. I mean, I'm making that up, but you know. So it's just human nature. You see a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of material motivation. And I saw people who had a lot of stuff and they were not happy. And they weren't really very nice people. You know, I saw how they treated their family, or their, you know, the husband had dumped the wife and run off with his secretary, or, you know, they, like I say, knock each other over to get out of the church and get home to watch the Super Bowl. I mean, you know, there's always nice people. There's always some sprinkling of good people. But I thought, you know, I remember thinking profoundly that, you know, I stay on this conveyor belt. I mean, I could get hit by a truck tomorrow. I actually was hit. I've been hit by a truck and a motorcycle. Oh yeah, if there's a lightning storm, do not stand next to me. I guarantee you, I'm gonna get hit. So, you know, I've had an interesting life. So and it's been good for me. It's purifying. But I wouldn't want to go through it again. So I was living in a life that if I stayed on the conveyor belt, I mean, anything could happen. But I was, you know, percentage-wise, I was going to get a big house and a car and a vacation house by the beach and, you know, whatever it is. But I saw people all around me who had those things and they weren't happy. And they weren't really, most of them, such nice people. So if I stay on the conveyor belt, I'm going to wind up like that. And I don't want to be like that. And there's got to be more to life. So that was one factor. Another factor is I wanted to become a doctor, and I was studying, you know, basic botany and biology and stuff like that. Just, you know, preliminary courses. And it just struck me. I mean, I was inclined towards atheism, because I thought you might as well be real. And you know, if you don't understand karma and reincarnation, you cannot square. How is there justice in this world? It just doesn't square. And I thought, you know, okay, that's for old people and people afraid of death. You know, it's just going on by material chemical reactions. Bury me under a fruit tree so I make some nice fertilizer. But I'm not going to have this fantasy that there's God in the sky, like Catcher in the Rye, who's, you know, going to catch me if I get into danger. Forget all that, you know? Because if God is all powerful, why is someone born blind and the other person is born with sight? Why some people has an easy life, someone has a difficult life? If God is all powerful, he could fix that. I mean, there's some horrible things that happen in this world. God could fix that. The other dynamic is God is all merciful. If he's all merciful and all powerful, he both has the ability to fix the problems and he has the inclination, because he's merciful. So looking at the world and what's happening, how can God be all merciful and all powerful? I'm not going to delude myself. You know, what is it? Religion is the opiate of the people. But then studying science, I thought things are balanced. Things are interknit. There's so many information systems. Things don't evolve, they devolve. That's a basic principle of entropy. You have a beautiful house, you don't maintain it, it just rots and molds and breaks down and goes back into the elements. Wherever you see design, order, pattern, and symmetry, behind it there's intelligence. That's our practical experience. And I challenge anyone to show me anything else. I've asked this question all over the place and I've studied it carefully. So I wasn't getting any good answers, but I thought on a personal level, well, on a broad scale, I don't think everything's happening by chance. I don't know how it's happening. I don't know what the nature of that intelligence, that designer is, but there's got to be something. I just, it's the either or question. Either there is God or there isn't God. And the logic for there being some designer intelligence, that makes the most sense. And then I was doing this internal turmoil. What's life all about and where am I going? Am I just going to be another robot on the conveyor belt? And is that what life's all about? I think it's Camus, the existentialist. The only real question is whether to kill yourself and how. Life is just struggle and suffering, and then you drop dead. Why prolong? What is that? I think it's Hobbes. It says brutish, brief, and beastly, describing life, Geez, pull the plug now. So that was going on. And the concept, there's got to be something higher. First time I saw devotees, I saw I was coming up from the beach in Laguna Beach, surfing all day in my own delusional world. I was just about to step off the street and I saw zoom, a motorcycle went by with 2 brahmacharis on it, saffron cloth, sikas flying. I thought, oh my gosh. Tim Leary, the LSD guy, was living in Laguna. I said, they must be with Leary. They must, either they're Buddhists took a wrong turn somewhere. I don't know what's happening, And then I was 16 years old. I got a copy of Prabhupada's Gita, 16 and a half. It was like one of those movies, Dong, the bell tolls, and the next page turns in the book. Dong, the bell tolls. It answered all my questions, deeply, profoundly. So I was saving my money, and I was going to go to India and find Srila Prabhupada and become his disciple. I figured God will guide me, I'll find him somehow or other. But I met the devotees, and they told me that this is our cornerstone Bhagavad Gita, and I was reading Prabhupada's Gita. And I told them, I'm saving my money. I want to go to India and become his student. And they said, you don't have to go to India. He's on a writing retreat in Los Angeles. Prabhupada was writing the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. He was finishing that up, and he was finishing the summary study of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, the Krishna book. So he was working on 2 books at once and finishing them up. And he was giving a talk every Sunday night. He'd give the Sunday feast, and he'd give class So wow. I said, can I go? They said, yeah, but we don't have a car. The devotees in those days, it's a long story. The only thing they had was a motorcycle. I had a car, so I would pick them up. I'd go to the Sunday program at the temple, which we did at noon, so that we could all pile in the car and drive up to LA. And once I heard Srila Prabhupada speak and I saw him, I thought, well, there is perfection in this world.
Our movement is very easy because we haven't got to manufacture something.
There is someone who is completely spiritually conscious. Here's living proof. And not only that, he's saying, hey, this isn't just for me, it's for you. Come on. This is how to do it. And not only that, he was offering freely. Here's the practical process how you can come to this platform too. And lo and behold, as I practiced it, just like you eat a good meal, you feel refreshed. Nobody has to tell you, you're full now. So that was the wonderful thing, that there was the text and the methodology and the practical way that I could, and it works. So that's enough about me.
You met Srila Prabhupada in 1969, moved to the Laguna Beach Temple, and were initiated by Prabhupada in 1971. What are your memories of his divine grace and Laguna Beach at that time?
Laguna Beach was pretty much the same. The housing prices have gone up, but it was the same, go there, forget your troubles, get sunburned, have your boyfriend dump you, whatever. And It's the same as it always was, as far as the city itself and the scene. Prabhupada was real. Somebody said one time, Prabhupada was in the spiritual world in Vaikuntha, but he had his feet firmly planted on the ground. Prabhupada was the most practical person I ever met in my life. And many, many people have the same experience. It was like meeting your grandfather or your father or your best friend. Prabhupada looked right through, I was just a little punk kid, and he saw myself, he saw my soul. And he dealt with me on that level. And he dealt with everyone like that, on that level. And he was just such a genuine person. Prabhupada had a great sense of humor. He had a fantastic sense of humor. He was the best at practical advice. Prabhupada knew Ayurveda. You know, if you were sick, he just knew so many things. And he loved everyone. I remember Prabhupada's servant saying, his secretary said to him, Prabhupada, everyone likes you. And without even thinking twice, Prabhupada responded, that's because I like everyone. And he did. He saw everybody as spirit soul, of value, with something to give in the world. There was Prabhupada giving a lecture in the early days in New York City. And in the middle of his, it's a rented storefront, and, half the people are, whatever. Oh, there's maybe 12 people in the class in the very beginning days. And in the middle of the lecture, a drunk, completely, he's got his pants on backwards, leaves in his hair, just really out of it. He comes stumbling and mumbling into himself, right past Prabhupada, right past the other people sitting there for Gita class. There was a little bathroom in the back, throws open the door, takes out from his stained overcoat 4 rolls of toilet paper and puts them in the bathroom and walks away. He was doing and Prabhupada said, his devotional service has begun. It's a small thing, and the guy was, as Prabhupada used to politely say, not quite in order. His mental state was not quite in order. But Prabhupada didn't see any of that. I mean, he saw it, but he overlooked it. So here is a spirit soul who somehow or other is doing some service to the Supreme, to Krishna. That will be to his eternal benefit. So that's the kind of person Srila Prabhupada was.